All right. One more thing. So this was actually on the table. It wasn't so much the Diddy thing, but I appreciate you talking about that. I want to bring this up because do you remember I pulled up this video of you, this older video. You was on Larry King. And so this is a video where you were on Larry King talking about the incarceration. And
That was about 15 years ago.
exactly. And so this is the second part, right? So I'm only going to play the parts where you were speaking, and I want you to comment on it. Okay? Judge?
I'm listening.
Okay.
Working.
When I started practicing 30 years ago, a 10 or 20-year sentence was a big deal. Now you go into any courtroom, you get 10, 20, 30 years. People are given 60 years for nothing.
Unifying factor of folks that we're locking up in this country is beyond race, beyond anything, is that we are locking up an alarming number of poor black folk, alarming number of poor Latino folk, and the white folk we're locking up are poor too. 29 people make money in the system every time someone is arrested.
There's money being made off of the blood and sweat of people that don't belong in prison. Plus,
we have to humanize the people that we're locking up in this country. If they just become numbers and just become race groups and just become poor folks, we forget about it.
it's all next on Larry King Now. Brother, encouragement, hope, and healing for inmates and their loved ones. Our old friend Mark Garagos, the renowned defense attorney whose celebrity clients have included Chris Brown, the late Michael Jackson, and he's co-author of a terrific book, Mistrial, an inside look at how the criminal justice system works and sometimes doesn't. Another old friend, Judge Joe Brown, he's, of course, the longtime host of his famous TV show, which ended its 15-year run earlier this year. A social activist, Joe is now considering going into politics. And with us again is Kevin Hagan. I say again because Kevin, who was incarcerated for 28 years, was released in 2011 from San Quentin, where he co-founded the IMPACT program. That stands for Incarcerated Men Putting Away Childish Things. I say again because I interviewed Kevin when he was a prisoner at San Quentin. Hill, who are you writing to?
Not a white man's activity or club.
So, Judge, if drugs were legal, we'd have empty prisons.
No, I don't think you'd have empty ones. There's something else going on. At the top end, that percentage of the world's incarcerated population reflects the fact that as a society, we have not addressed the ordinary working man getting obsoleted by industrial technology and computerization. Archie Bunker keeps getting knocked down a notch and people drop out the bottom, and the criminal justice system deals with, these days, I guess it's been morphed into something that handles surplus labor rather than crime so much. So as long as we've got that problem, we're going to have a lot of work in the criminal justice system. And it's all tied in. It's got to do with dysfunctional lifestyles and a lot of other things that promote this prison population. So drugs just happen to be the convenient designer crime of the month.
It's larger than that.
But it really comes down to this, and I guess this is kind of the morphing of what you're talking about, Judge. It comes down to money or lack thereof, because the unifying factor of folks that we're locking up in this country is beyond race, beyond anything, is that we are locking up an alarming number of poor black folk, alarming number of poor Latino folk, and the white folk we're locking up are poor too. So it's poverty is the unifying issue, and lack of access to jobs and educational opportunity. And so what we see is if you ask somebody in a prison, why are you in there? They will raise their hand and say, whatever I was doing was somewhat money related, unless they were the customer of the anesthetic, which is the drug.
Well,
So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little timestamps of just you. So I want to play it, pause it, and then you could comment if you want. So do you want to say something?
Yeah, well, this is based on years and decades of analysis, and the problem is that, yeah, it's poor people, black, white, brown, red, yellow, and that's because they are singularly unable to navigate the new economic circumstances in the 21st century, and they have lifestyles that they have adopted and found reinforcing to what they already were doing, looking at Hollywood and listening to the hip hop gangster rap genre. So they think it's okay. And you can see it, you go to a restaurant and they're loud and they cuss all the time and they want to share everything they do with everybody in the restaurant. They play their music so you can hear it from 4 blocks away. And they dress garishly, looking like they're going to thug out on somebody. And they wave a flag, come get me. And then the way they carry themselves, they lack manners, they lack social courtesies. And it's a product of just having a poor upbringing, and there's nobody at home to teach them. So they're taught this is all right, this is glorified. And until somebody says this is not the way to go, they're going to keep doing it. So, yeah, you can predict who's going. There are also some other things. We did a study one time and we found that a very, very, very high percentage of the people in the penitentiaries had visual acuity problems. They really couldn't see. So they're sitting in the back of the classroom where they can clown, but they can't see the blackboard. And you get problems like that.
All right, I'm gonna play the next clip.
For a drug problem, you're looking for some other solution. It's different.
Look at it this way. If you think of labor as a commodity like wheat, corn, or cotton, when you get a glut in a commodity, price drops. This is the working wage. You don't want Timothy McVeigh coming along again and blowing up another courthouse in Oklahoma City. So when you've got a commodity glut, you do 3 things. Store the surplus, subsidize the would-be producer, and cut back production. We put our surplus in a jail cell instead of a grain silo. The subsidy is the welfare check, and the cutting back of production is the banging out, drugging out, dropping out, ineffective and lack of education, and they do it to themselves. They get a felony record, and they become very difficult to employ. They make the communities chaotic, so they're not politically cohesive, and they get taken out of the picture, and they serve a function for the system, because there's a lot of money to be made there.
Yes.
And a lot of things.
Coming up.
For him. So he gets 5 years, Joey gets community service.
And we're one of the only countries in the world, and watch this, Larry, one of the only countries in the world that will lock up juvenile offenders for life. Give life sentences to a juvenile offender. There's no other country in the world that does that.
Judge, the African American imprisonment rate is 7 times higher than the imprisonment rate of whites.
Well, that's to be expected if you get into the dynamics. There is a discrepancy in sentencing, but it's not so much race as to where you find the races economically. So one of the things we've got to do is look at what's actually happening in terms of the demographics. We've got this thing that's still residual in a large part of the country where your income depends on how many babies you have, and we're not doing anything about 10, 11, 12, 14-year-old girls starting to have the first of 7, 8, 9, 10, 14, 15 children.
Is that mostly black girls?
That's a lot of poor girls, but the bottom line is it's most noticeable in certain areas. Now, we've got a thing that's 15 years out of whack in the Memphis area where if you take African American males between 18 and 29, out of every 11 of them in certain areas that are predominantly black, 9 of them are actually incarcerated. They're not on probation or parole. They're actually locked up. When the federal system abolished parole, that really got to be a mess.
Hell, as a black man, don't you take this personally?
And they have a prison industrial complex, for lack of a better term, that they support. And the correctional officers want to build more prisons. They want to warehouse more people because that enhances their power and their ability
They want more
to
members.
do it. They want more members, and you got to have people. You have to take Joe's expression. You got to have more of the commodity to warehousing. What did you call it? The silo.
Yeah, you put it in a jail cell instead of a grain silo. There's a lot of money here. 1996, I was running grand jury in Shelby County, and they had to check out all books and accounts, everything of government entities. And they had this thing about privatization. So
I was going to ask you about
there
that.
was the phone system, and what was going on is the scheme that the county commission came up with is $1 up front, 6% of your net. Well, I was astonished when I discovered that the net profit for the phone system was $94 million. And you're going like, This guy doesn't even have an office. He's got 3 part-time secretaries who collect checks from the phone companies when they bill their customers. That's too much money.
The vendors at the jails. The vendors at the jails are making a fortune.
29 people make money in the system every time someone is arrested. That's 29 people along the line. And then you talk about privatization of prisons. We can go right as soon as this show's over. Anybody can get on the stock exchange and invest money. And this is what's diabolical. Literally invest money in a corporation whose profit motive is locking up more people. So we can bet and make money on locking up more people.
But you can't find employment for the people because, government needs to stay out of business and they can run themselves. So what happens to Archie Bunker? Like I said before, he doesn't have a job. The American tradition, you work hard, you get ahead, you're 19 years old, you're getting ready to settle down with Mary Lou, and Uncle Willie's going to get you a job in the warehouse and learn how to drive a fork trip. Well, before you can get there, Uncle Willie's been with the company for 19 years. He gets a pink slip, says, bye, sucker. We got taken over by some young execs who want to be billionaires before they get 50, so we're downsizing for corporate profitability. Go find something for you to do. Screw your mortgage, sending kids to college, car note, that's your problem, not mine.
What keeps you going?
We've gotten to the point now where a lot of people feel like getting the trains running on time is more important than justice.
97+% of the people in American penitentiaries pled guilty. Less than 3% got found guilty, and 85% of those that pled confessed. But the system has gotten locked into a situation now where they don't really profit by people changing their lives. It actually serves a viable function for the overall society that is tamped down and hidden.
You know why 97% of the people
criminal activity.
Keep them in.
In other words, you want them, not just keep them in, you want them to keep committing criminal acts.
You're kidding.
That's a set of our population. But I believe if folks understood.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the
data.
overall thing. If you back off and look at it in a political science function and you take the entire thing, nobody connects over here with there, but there is a connection. So when you look at it, there's actually a functionality that crime serves for this system that has come to depend on.
If someone is watching this from Mars, they're going to say this is insane.
It is insane.
We'll come back with a honking all the time.
One of the reasons I never became a prosecutor, I was following my father around, who was a DA, and I was in high school, and I went to watch him at work, and he was locking up somebody, an 18-year-old kid. He was the DA. 18-year-old kid for 16 months in state prison for being in a room where marijuana was smoked. He didn't smoke it, but he was in the room. That used to be a crime, sentenced to state prison in California, progressive
Aren't there
state.
a lot of marijuana users at San Quentin?
Oh, yeah.
At Raymond Tubb, will the United States declare that the war on drugs is a failure and come up with a more effective policy? The war on drugs failed, right?
Right, but I agree.
We don't even know who
I agree with
started.
Joe. If you don't take a holistic view of this, you're doomed to just repeat it. It's like pushing down the gopher here, and he's going to pop his head up over there.
Okay, and see, you have to understand, a lot of what goes on officially is not for approved purposes. There is a big problem with the U.S. Embassy and State Department system, say, dealing with Mexico. A lot of the drugs and guns that come in that people get nervous about come in through the embassy. They're trying to generate on that whole thing they had with, what was it, where they had the sting that went wrong and some border patrol agents. Too Fast, Too Furious.
Right, Fast and Furious.
See, what they were trying to do is get a treaty. Ratified treaties become part of the supreme law of the land. And some people had the idea they wanted to diffuse the Second Amendment by getting an appropriate treaty with Mexico, and they thought that was valuable enough.
At the end of the day, Judge,
do what
all
they
due
wanted
respect,
to
that's
do.
not the issue. The issue here is education and jobs.
Yeah, but the
education and jobs.
The issue's right, but you have to look at the whole society. We are where we are because of education and technology. But all across the spectrum, everywhere, they have made it more and more difficult for somebody to get an adequate education. Even the ones that go to university.
Because we cut out the subsidies for education, and we subsidize building prisons and warehousing more people.
People don't even get the idea how expensive it is for prisons. Most states spend somewhere between $4,800 as a low to maybe about $8,000 per student through the high school years. But if you take in all costs considered, you're running somewhere between $85,000 and about $100,000 per inmate
Yes.
at an institution per year. Now,
is
I don't mean to laugh.
Right,
that's not ridiculous.
What do you suggest to the average citizen to?
There's a few things you can do immediately today. Every time you walk into a store today, whatever your regular stores, walk up to the manager and ask them how many ex-felons or ex-incarcerated individuals have they hired to work at this particular store, and encourage them and say you're going to take your business elsewhere if they won't.
Hire felons.
Hire ex-felons.
What change would you make tomorrow? You issue
I
an
don't
edict.
think I've already hired felons, whether intentionally or unintentionally. There's something to be said for that. I just because it was yesterday morning, Judge Carter's idea of bringing in people when they're released, and something as simple as tattoo removal, which I had never really thought of, but he says he has
Forces them to do. Or
well,
recommend.
it allows them to get jobs from people who are scared.
Exactly.
Because it's all economic based. I mean, people are not out committing petty crime because they like to commit petty crime. Right. They're committing petty crime because they want to get a fix, because they're going to do this or they're going to do that.
What would you change, Keith?
Well, I deal with the drug situation, the guys that are strung out on drugs, and try to find some alternative instead of sending them to prison, and education. But what I would do would go back to the neighborhood and put some of them programs back in those schools that they've taken from them kids, that those kids need, so they don't get raised by the streets.
We're out of time, but one quick thing you change.
I'd change the child rearing strategies, and I'd also emphasize education.
Thank you all very much.
There you have it. So
Yeah. See, one of the things that I put in place that actually reduced the statewide recidivism rate from about 84% over a 10-year period down to just 18, and it was dropping when I retired, is to get them, the young male, focused on being a man up. And when you get the idea that manhood embraces certain universal things, you start focusing on those and you get a purpose instead of everything just being random lack of cause. And you don't give up hope, because the tougher it gets, the more adversity you get to conquer. And the more adversity you conquer, the more heroic you become. So you look at yourself every morning in the mirror and ask whether you've been doing what you were supposed to do, whether you're going to prepare that day to do better, and whether you were determined to improve what you could do tomorrow. So you have this battle going on, and whether or not the conditions of battle are harsh, it's like what happens with soldiers. For various and sundry reasons, they want to be men, and they go above and beyond, and they'll put up with the most amazing hardships instead of saying, oh my God, there's no hope, I'm going to go kill myself. And to a great extent, between when I did this 15 years ago and now, I've had reinforcement for the idea that, one, drug addicts don't change unless they get a cause to live. And the easiest cause is to get them to man up. And you can do this for the young women too. So they get a purpose. And when you give a young person a purpose in life, they do better. One of the problems that we face right now is the young people get no purpose. They get a selfish motivation. Just get what you want and hell with everybody else. And that's always something that's active. That's always something in the background, but it cannot be the primary purpose, because that person will have no character, will have no duty, honor, obligation, responsibility, accountability, will not be a person dedicated toward making where he or she lives a better, safer, more secure place filled with economic prosperity, sense of purpose, morality, and ethics, and will not become men and women of public peace, dignity, and order who can be brave and courageous when necessary. You don't give them a purpose, they won't go there.
well said. And I really love that segment. So, I think sometimes it's good just to go down memory lane, look retro Judge Joe Brown. And a lot of things, everything you said in that video, you have said present day. So,
Now,
but
oh, one other thing. You see, somebody like me needs to be the one in charge of what happens with this, not a convicted felon that's responsible for most of the crackheads and babies in the Southeast United States, from Florida to Chicago. You don't need Kanye West in charge of making recommendations for this kind of thing. You don't need Kim Kardashian doing these kind of things. You need somebody experienced, wise, intelligent, and perceptive in these kinds of fields who is going to start giving you the advice. See, I'm looking like even the Attorney General Bondi. I remember what I knew and did not know when I was at that stage of my legal career. I know people, I had Johnny Cochran's phone number in my phone, and we'd called each other. We met up back in 1966 at UCLA, and we were friends. I knew Willie Gary, who holds the record for the largest jury verdict in American history and 4 of the top 10 verdicts and about that many of the top 10 settlements in American history. So when you're talking to people like that, you get a hell of a lot of difference between that kind of outlook, that extreme amount of experience, wisdom, and acumen, and how things work and how it all fits together, the big picture. Then when you get like a certain somebody we have discussed who has yet to try a jury trial in his career, yet is known as supposedly an expert in a certain field. So
yeah.
why don't we have those people being the advisors instead of a serious felon who is one of the most evil, vile criminals in recent American history, or somebody who is a porn queen, and somebody who was the porn queen's husband, wife? Where did they get the expertise in the subject, and why listen to them? In
Right.
other words, I don't fault Trump so much as I do his access and the fact that he has certain advisors who seem to be functioning as gatekeepers and restricting access to those people he ought to know, who he ought to know in order to maintain their own personal power base. So it's a hazard of politics and the way things work, and maybe we can get around it.
Well, listen, I enjoy watching that and hearing what you had to say, and so that's kind of the direction that I want to go with you. Talking about the justice system and the law, and so next time, I do want to um, add another element to it and highlight. I want you to highlight the falsely incarcerated. So that would be next time. So yeah, but I think this was good for people to understand. The United States, we do have the largest jailers in the world. And one, this is a question I want to ask you: should Americans consciously invest in prison system stock?
No, I don't think a penitentiary system should be allowed to be a stock issuing company at all. They should all be government, not private enterprise, because there's no incentive to do right if you're making money off of doing wrong. Now, that's just the way I think about it, because when you privatize stuff, you give an incentive to keep the thing going because people have paid good money acquiring stock, making an investment in these entities, and they don't want to lose their money. They're not in the business of running a charity, they're in the business of profiting.
Yeah, I agree. There are
And
plenty other
so
ways to
that's
make
why
money.
sometimes you and I clash when I say, in my mind, the big picture goes, we don't sit there and act like we idolize the dysfunctional, the corrupt, and the questionable who do not know how to behave. And when we get upset because XYZ has done such and such and there is a consequence to it, everybody wants to get excited. The ideal situation from terms of propaganda is ignore that person